Welcome back to Division I Rejects. I'm your host, Kobe Manzo. This is episode 148, recording this the night of January 29th. Shorter episode tonight. A lot of life, a lot of school, other things going on, but still, the episodes come back every Tuesday morning regardless of that. Tonight, I'm joined by one of the best quarterbacks in Division III football this past year. He was a Gagliardi Trophy semifinalist. Probably heard of the guy. He put up some video game numbers over at Illinois College. Destin Chance joins me here shortly. Between him and his wide receiver, Colin Brunstein, I do believe was the name. Those two were putting on highlight reels just about every week. They lose to a very talented, Wartburg squad in the first round of the national playoffs. We'll talk a lot with him about that, his performance, some transfer portal allure from the D3 side of things, kids trying to make jumps up, which talked about some big-time commits from D3 realm last week. Other big news in the small college football world, a national champion NAIA coach going to a Division II powerhouse. That news broke just recently this week. We're going to cover all about that and a very, very timely fill of a job in a great conference and a great program. If you want to see that, or if you want to see the other pieces of the podcast today, use the video chapters, the timestamps. If you're on YouTube, they're on the little red bar there. Otherwise, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, they're all in the description. Otherwise, though, we've got a huge Week 0 matchup coming to D2 football. The legislation from the NCAA passed just, a week ago? And now we've got some of the top, most premier programs in the country squaring off in this new Week 0. A lot of exciting things going on. Finally, though, another new Division II head coaching hire, this time out of the MEC. And then we've got a playoff team in D3 football with a new man at the helm. Maybe not a new man, but a new man taking the role as head coach. So a lot of coaching news. This is the offseason. What do you expect? But nonetheless, a lot of great stuff to cover in today's episode. It'll be just me. But as always, you can watch this episode on YouTube if you are. Don't forget to subscribe. Otherwise, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you catch these episodes, drop us a rating. How about that? I don't know. Is it a 5-star deal? Whatever it is. How many stars? 6, 7, 8, 9? However many there are, do all of them and then add another one, please, if you're a real one. Otherwise, quit listening to me blabber. Follow us on the socials. Get in touch. Tap in on the merch. Yada, yada, yada. Let's go talk to Destin Chance. Joining the show tonight, one of the best throwers of the football, or the pigskin, if you will, in Division III football, or statistically in the nation. It's the man out of Illinois College, Destin Chance. What's up, dude?
What's going on, Kobe? Thanks for having me.
Excited to get you on here, brother. I know you've made a couple of our graphics in the past because you've been putting up absurd numbers. And when people say video game numbers, we're just going to start calling them Chance numbers over here. Or Brunstein numbers. I guess you could. Is there there's not a weird combination of the two of them?
Yeah, flip coin, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, man. But no, excited to get you on here. It's been a hell of a year for you guys. And outside of, the two that put up these incredible stats, you guys as a team, as a whole, have put together an incredible year and through some ups and downs, and especially in the D3 landscape that it is right now, put together a really respectable season. Kind of just started off, man, reflecting back on it. It's one of those things, bittersweet, obviously make it to the playoffs and have that game against Wartburg, but accomplished a lot this year, yeah?
Yeah, I think our goals coming in from the season was to win the first ever conference championship for the program. And that was the first, and it was pretty awesome I could do that as with my brother as my offensive coordinator. He played at IC before me, and I kind of followed him there. I left Whitewater during COVID. COVID kind of was a weird situation, especially with football. But yeah, I had the opportunity to play under him, and it's an opportunity to make history with my brother. It's a pretty awesome thing.
I read about that, and that's how do you even approach how special that is? I'm in a fortunate situation where my brother plays up at Northern Michigan where I'm at, so being able to, for a time before I had to step away from football, share and be on the same team as him, but in that different capacity where you talk about being an OC and being the guy who's actually under center, that has just got to be such an interesting dynamic for you. What was the adjustment period for that and getting, although I'm sure you're very comfortable with him as a dude, getting comfortable with him as an offensive coordinator and a play caller?
He's very respectful, man. So, coming into the season, it was kind of his way or the highway, and I knew that. And, brotherly love. But no, all seriousness, we're both the same way. When it comes to being on the football field, we have the same end goal and the same plan, and we want to win, and we know what it takes to win. I was a part of Whitewater, and that was a team that went to the national championship at the time. And there's a standard of football when you get to that top level that you have to succeed. You kind of have to try to surpass that to be successful, because I mean, anyone can come in, be a mediocre 5-4 and kind of whatever. But both of us, we didn't want that. My brother's a true winner, and playing for him has been a very awesome experience. He took our first high school team to state championship, the first ever, and now look what he's doing at IC. So, I mean, I love learning from him, and I listen to everything he says. He's probably the smartest X's and O's guy I've ever been a part of in my life. So,
That's
awesome learning from him.
Dude. And, you know, potentially the best part is that it consolidates and makes the rest of the fam, their viewing experience on Saturday, that much easier, huh?
Yeah, because he ended up going to West Virginia State, and he was playing over there, and they're kind of trying to decide back and forth like who to go watch. So it's a lot easier. So
everyone hops in and makes their way over, dude. That's pretty special. And to keep talking about you personally, which I'm sure you absolutely just adore, right? But let's talk about your hell of a year. A couple of records from you, some big time ones, that being passing yards and the passing touchdowns record. 4,036 and 48 passing tuds, man. That's just a tough combo to do at any level against any kind of competition. And what allowed you to do it outside of the absolute dog on the outside named Colin?
I mean, up front, I mean, it starts with those up front guys. I mean, without them, no quarterback's able to do anything. And then we have a guy like TJ Little. I mean, he's a 1,000-yard rusher, and I think he missed like 3 or 4 games with a high ankle sprain, and he still had 1,000 yards rushing. With how our offense works, it puts each and every player in very good situations. And I mean, when you run on a 4-1 box, I mean, good things happen. And when we have dudes all across the field, a line that can block and we can establish a run, it opens up a lot, especially as a quarterback, but also for your offense coordinator to be able to call the plays he wants to call. So when guys try to key on Colin, I mean, we have guys like Cam Lewis, Will Campbell, Grant Stegman, and guys that come off the bench and can impact. Colin Dubois, he was like a guy that would play running back and then also played some slot a little bit. But we have guys all across the board that can all make plays at any given second. So, I mean, the records are one thing, but at the end of the day, I mean, the upfront guys and the whole team doing that is kind of a statement of the guys I had around me. So.
Well said, brother. Well said. And you talk about that first conference championship and the momentous achievement that was. Well, it didn't come easy, and it actually started off probably in the absolute wrong direction for you guys, right? You talk about that Lake Forest game, and a game that I'm sure you probably want back, right? And that one, for some teams, people say that could be the best thing that ever happens to them, right? An early loss or an early kind of humbling, if you will, and maybe things don't go right, and you have to have this kind of internal reflection and think about – maybe it wasn't so introspective and all the prophecy and all of that kind of things. But what did you guys learn from that one? Because you look at some of those scores from the last couple weeks and you are boat racing the shit out of some of these teams. But you go back, there were some very gritty wins that started off this season. So it was not just roll on out there and score 70 against some of these guys.
Yeah, week 1, that was really a smack in the face for us. Me specifically, I ended up tearing my Liz Frank week 1 against Milliken. Coming in week 2, we play a pretty much full 5th-year Lake Forest team. And my backup quarterback, Tyson Elliott, I think that kid's going to be a stud one day, but it's hard for a freshman to come in against all 5th-year D-line. I mean, that D-line was probably one of the best D-lines I played against, and I put him up close to Wartburg. Okay. And I mean, that's a statement. That's just – I'm not saying they're comparable, but I'm saying they're one of the best.
I hear you. I hear you.
So I went in that game. I couldn't even walk morning of, and I knew that I had to go out there, and sometimes it takes grit. And I knew I had to put those guys in my bag and try to get out there and play. Probably was too hurt to play that game. I was missing a lot of throws, and I couldn't play off foot how I wanted to. And I mean, it was a tough one, but my foot finally was able to kind of build up enough scar tissue where I was able to move a little bit later on in the season and extend plays. And a huge part of my game, 2 years ago, I played at Illinois College, and I was the leading rusher on the team. So I loved running the football, and this year has just been a huge learning experience and actually making me rely on my brain and actually read the defense and execute the X's and the O's instead of just relying on my athleticism. But the biggest thing losing that Lake Forest game was we have a bunch of 5th years, 2 on our team, and we were a mature team. And we knew that we had to put our noses down and grind, and we couldn't just dwell on that loss and just live in it. We knew we had to continue to get better each and every day, and that's what those guys did. We didn't fold and we didn't lay down. We just continued to improve.
Yeah, man. You talk about maybe being too hurt to perform, at least, especially at 100%. Now, whether it was your 90, 80, 70, 60, or et cetera, people on the outside looking in may think, well, why even try it at all? Right? Because now you're putting yourself and potentially your team in a worse off situation. But now, for people who know the sport, and it's more specifically this level of the sport in Division III, you talk about some of those goals that you have in the preseason. And week 2 is, hey, that's still pretty damn early. So a lot of the things everything basically is still ahead of you guys. The conference championship, that berth to the national tournament. And when you're in Division III, and there are, you can count the amount of at-large bids on my hand right here. One of those losses could all of a sudden mean that one of the goals on your whiteboard, when everyone meets, when all 100 whatever you meet in August or September, whenever it is, one of those could be crossed off the board. So I think it's interesting at this level in particular that you almost have to. And I do understand that for sure. What was the feeling like after that loss, knowing that, hey, everything's going to be just that much harder from here on out?
Yeah, especially in our conference, we know you have to win conference or you're not making the playoffs. You're not getting the next one. And I mean, it's huge. Our conference is kind of not looked at as one of the toughest conferences in the country. We have Monmouth, Lake Forest, Ripon. I mean, there is some good teams in our conference for sure, and there's a lot of competition. And I mean, going into the Monmouth game, I mean, they beat Lake Forest, and Lake Forest beat the crap out of us. And I was able to actually put my team in a better situation because I was able to extend the play a little bit. And that was the biggest thing for me, is like leading into that next week, like I'd ask myself if I'm hurting the team with me being out here. And I talked to my head coach and I was like, I'm going to do everything I can. But if I'm hurting the team with me being out here, like take me out. I want my team to be in the best situation. And at the end of the day, I want to win football games if that's me on the field or not me on the field. But at the end of the day, we all decided that we weren't in the best situation with me being on the field, and I just balled.
Yeah, dude. And, it's easy to ask some guys on a team that maybe was a fringe team this year and got the snubbed from the national dance, but talking to a guy who ended up winning the conference championship, gets that automatic berth into the playoffs. What are the thoughts, just preliminary-wise, from some of the guys in that locker room on the current structure of the playoff picture? I mean, we're not penning any official legislation to the powers that be here, but what are some of the thoughts from those guys and some of the rhetoric being tossed around right now of possible expansion or maybe a go back and redo at how they look at some of the selection criteria as it concerns the playoff teams?
Well, I for sure think that in the playoffs, there's teams that are top 25 teams that probably deserve to be in the playoffs and play on, but aren't. And like you can look at a WIAC school, and probably the top 4 schools out of that conference can probably go and compete and maybe make a playoff run and compete in a national championship any given week. And then you have like St. John's are usually pretty dominant, and there's a bunch of other schools, John Carroll. But I think it'd be good. You have more top 25s are going to be better competition games leading into it. And like maybe teams like us, we don't get a number 3 team in the country bid coming into the playoffs. That's a tough task. They had 2 weeks off and they had a bye, and we were pretty banged up, and we don't really have the numbers that they did at the time. And it's tough. By the end of the day, it's football. There's no excuses, and you just got to put your nose down and grind.
Yeah, there's a lot of conferences that are talked about kind of on that upper echelon in Division III. The WIAC is certainly one of them. And like you said, I didn't have to say your conference is just not right there as far as the kind of the public opinion of those kind of things. And with that being said, you and I both know there's a lot of great football that's played in there. But with that being said, you and I both also know that people see these egregious numbers and stat lines and all these milestones of these natures. And what's the first thing that people who don't know jack about your conference, your kind of football, D3 football as a whole, they see those numbers, what do they think?
I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, I can only accomplish what I can accomplish. So, I try not to listen too much about what's going on the outside. I mean, there's always going to be critics, and one day they're going to love you, the next day they're going to hate you. So you can't really listen to the noise. The best thing you can do is go out there and compete, do what you can do, and just ball and see what happens. But
textbook.
At the end of the day, you can't dwell on anyone else's opinion. And yes, that's what it is. So.
Textbook, dude. Because that was it. That was the Caleb Presley, if you will. What do you say to people that say, and insert something ridiculous, as in the people that, because, you know, we see them all the time being at a lower division type of university that like to discredit achievements of guys that have gone out and done a lot of things that maybe aren't on the national scene. And, you know, I think the best comeback might be, well, buy a ticket, come to a game, right? Come see what this is about instead of just seeing the stat line, seeing the graphic.
Yes, 100%.
Hell yeah, dude. But we'll move on, though. We'll talk about that Wartburg squad, which you had talked to me a little bit about before, and we heard all about their linebacking core and that defensive front as a whole. I mean, their down linemen in particular as well. You had already mentioned them earlier on, and they gave North Central everything they could handle and more on their home field. Talk about the end of the season for you guys and what you saw from not only from that Wartburg defense and you know particularly, but also from your guys in that game in a tough contest that you knew was going to be an uphill battle.
I mean, our guys were ready to fight. We knew we were going to play the number 3 team in the country, and no, we didn't back down. That's for sure. We didn't go in and be like, "Oh, number 3 team in the country, we're just going to roll over for them." Offensively, we just did not put our defense in the best situations. They had a half field to work with most of the game. And looking at the film, if you look at Monmouth gave them a run for their money until the fourth quarter, and then Luke Lannon. I mean, Wartburg probably should have had North Central. But if you look at it, their defense is very fundamentally sound. And I knew coming into the game I was going to have to extend plays with my legs. And it just so happened I was not able to do that. I pulled my hamstring because I wasn't used to running. And I was finally getting my foot good enough to where I was able to run. I pulled my hamstring against Lawrence the week before. And I retweaked it first drive. And not really excuses, but the bottom line, their up front guys are insane. Their middle linebacker was a stud, and they had their DBs were good as well. And I knew all that. And you look at defense like that, like you have to kind of get them uncomfortable. If you're able to extend plays and make some plays where it's not just fundamental exit to nose plays and where things break down, that's kind of where you make your money against those defenses. And that's not something I was able to execute, and I wasn't able to do against the number 3 team in the country. And throwing 2 picks and having a scoop and score fumble is not a good situation. You're not going to win football games with having mistakes like that against the number 3 team in the nation. Yeah,
it's a bad margin to be in, and that turnover margin. When you're on the wrong side of it, man, you got tough sledding ahead of you. And it's funny how the body works like that, because obviously after an injury of the nature you suffer early in the season, all of your effort and focus outside of the obvious, like the game planning and the stuff on the field, goes into, okay, rehabbing this and getting this to be the best possible version it can be, especially you talk about a playoff game and the national implications. And then your body's like, well, you've been spending so much time on this. Actually, the rest of your body, the rest of your muscles haven't maybe quite caught up and aren't used to the shit that you're doing now. You freak because you rehab the shit out of it, get back on the field. It's a tough go, man, and you're not the first person I've heard that's happened to. But like you said, it's just circumstantial. It's part of the game, and everyone has to deal with it. Some people just get the shorter stick on any given Saturday. But kind of a tougher question for you, but I think it's an important one in transparency at the D3 level. And talking about the transfer portal, and a guy like you that would obviously have, and again, not advocating for anything here, but a guy like you who would obviously have suitors at the next level when you talk about the production that you've been able to do and we've seen showcased at this level. You're not a guy that I would imagine that is incredibly lacking in size or that has some of the typical knocks maybe of moving up a division. Granted, obviously we touched on the family ties earlier. You know, what's tempting or maybe not so tempting about the portal for a guy like you who's done all of this and then more at this level?
I mean, everyone can look at other schools and think that grass is always greener on the other side, but there's no guarantees. You can hit the portal and go to another school, but there's no guarantee that you're going to play. We got 10 returners coming back on the offense side of the ball. Coach D, our head coach, and my brother, of course, and I got good relationships with both those guys, and Coach Reed, and Coach Neese. And we got more to prove at the end of the day, and nobody on our team's satisfied. And with the 10 guys coming back, they know the standard of football that we have to get to, and we brought in another O lineman and putting in the right pieces, be able to compete with those schools at the top of the line. And that's at the end of the day, whenever you have a goal that you came short on, it's hard to just turn your back on those guys. These guys have been playing with forever. Charlie Patterson on the defense side of the ball, I played with him in high school. He was All-American as well. He went to the same high school as me, and
that's pretty cool.
Colin Dubois as well, and Hunter Newbold. And so we just have a goal, and it's hard to turn your back on that goal whenever you haven't completed the goal. So
seeing it through, man, and
gonna have to get back
huge.
in there, and
seeing it through, starting something, wanting to be around to see it come to fruition, and see and make it known that this, not only you, but this nucleus of guys that you talk about were the ones to really make it happen. And then obviously the goal is to set up the next couple of classes to kind of follow in those footsteps. Yeah. Now, we talk about, me and the people here talked about some guys last week that were making the jump to schools like frickin' North Carolina and some of these other highfalutin places, which is awesome to see from this level. What are some of the perspectives, again, from you and the guys there? I know from an outsider's perspective, that might seem like an obvious choice. Going from, just as an example, a Muhlenberg to a North Carolina and playing in Chapel Hill is quite the ridiculous jump. But, you know, what are some of the guys' thoughts when they see moves like that get announced on, probably see them on social media and other things?
I mean, you can't really blame people,
of course.
Especially at the Division I level. I mean, them guys are getting paid money that they might not ever see. I mean, the NFL is not guaranteed. So I guess when it's there, sometimes you have to take advantage of that. But we don't really have that luxury here at the Division III level. Can't really knock anyone for leaving, but everyone on our team decided to stay. We kind of knew we wanted more, so that's why everyone on our team came back to kind of prove that.
All right, enough with the tricky questions for you. That's all I got for today. I'll leave you with one of the easier one. I'll give you a layup. What are you up to until August? Hopefully a little break from slinging the rock. Yeah,
I took a little break. But
obviously spring ball too, not to discredit. You know, obviously got a spring ball slate ahead of us.
Yeah, I'm gonna start throwing a little more. I've thrown a couple times, but Tuesdays and Thursdays are just gonna be like footwork, speed work, and throwing days with guys. So, and that'll be all on the players. So, which I know the offense pretty well inside and out. So I can kind of lead these guys in the right direction where they need to be, and kind of get our tempo and get our standard of football in with the new transfers that are coming in. So the biggest thing is leading the weight room. Try to get back up to at least 215 and kind of maintain my speed and actually get my speed back, because that's something I wasn't able to play with last year. But to continue to be hungry is the biggest thing, especially in these times. And I think our whole team is hungry, but as a leader of the football team, kind of have to be on these guys, especially in the off season, and kind of keep their nose down and know what the standard is, because it's not like we're competing with other schools in our conference or other people for your position. Like we're competing right now in the off season with guys from Wartburg, North Central, Whitewater. So that's kind of the mindset we have right now. And that's something we're looking to prove and showcase when the season starts.
Wouldn't it be some shit too if you were up to the weight room and then the weight room was divided in half and you guys get racks 1 through 8 and Monmouth, you get racks 9 through 16, right? And we're going to put a barrier in the middle, and we're just going to start adding up some numbers.
Yeah. I mean, I think the numbers would be shooting up pretty quick if there's just a couple times a week with them guys. You know what I mean? But that would be pretty cool. But would.
But like you said, that's not it, right?
That would be awesome. But I think
it's all internal. Yeah. It's tough, man. We need some of that.
It's a mindset. I think our guys, we have that. So I don't think we need to see them to know what we need to be doing and the right direction our team needs to be going in. Our team's pretty much all fifth years next year, and we know the goal and know the steps, and we know the standard of football we have to be at going into the season next year. So,
hell yeah, you talk the talk almost as good as you sling the rock, but if not better. Appreciate you.
I'd rather sling the rock a little better than how I talk.
Yeah, no, that's why I said almost, because it's You're up here, my man. You're up here. I've enjoyed watching you, following up with you guys. Excited to see what you have rolling over these next couple months. And obviously, head into the fall. You and those guys, man. A lot to come over there for the Blue Boys. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you. Have a good rest of your night, all right?
You as well. I'm ready to run the rock next year. Sure.
Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah.
See you, James.
Yeah.
Appreciate Destin coming on the show. Now we're going to switch lanes a little bit. Kind of go NAIA, also D2, and talk about a coach that has made the jump from one league to the next. And that's this man right here. Doug Sacha taking the job at Lenoir Rhyne. What a get for the Bears. They lose their head coach just 2 weeks ago, and we talked about it on the show, Mike Jacobs, who's taking the job at an FCS playoff contender over there in Mercer. And, he goes on, obviously bigger and better. They've got another coach that is doing the exact same thing, albeit maybe a couple levels lower. This seems like a great get for the Bears over at Lenoir Rhyne, a team that has had a lot of playoff success in recent history, even going back just to this year. They've certainly made some noise in the playoffs. And right there, Chuck Bittner from D2Football.com, our guy over there, he says, in 6 years at Kaiser, a record of 55-15, 5 conference championships, 5 playoff appearances, 2 trips to the finals, and obviously this past year, the national championship from a team that just started a football program not 8 years ago, I do believe. This is just all really incredible stats from a guy that knows how to win. And it's very impressive. He was the head coach there for 6 years. So he won the conference all but one and made the playoffs all but 1 year. Like, those kind of numbers you cannot make up. And another couple pieces of, stats and other things there. They had a 786 winning percentage overall, a 916 winning percentage in the Sun Conference. And when you look at their schedule this year, there are only 2 losses at the beginning of the year. If I do believe, I'll double check right now, both to Division II teams. Not even 2 NAIA squads. They matched up against some quality Division II opponents in the first couple weeks of the season. And, I think they got better because of it. Yeah, they lose to Mississippi College by 3 in week 1. And then they go and play Valdosta State at Valdosta, in Titletown. A Valdosta team that made it all the way to the national quarterfinal in Division II. They lose that one. And they've had some very quality wins, over the last couple of years. The best part, I think, for Lenoir Rhyne, I think to be encouraged by this, is that Jacobs resigns officially to take the Mercer job less than 2 weeks ago. And the timing of this is so important. And it's just bravo to them being able to get this done. And also to, I would assume, Coach Jacobs kind of letting them know that this is happening. This is not the kind of deal where Mike Jacobs walks into the office and takes the paper and throws it on the AD's desk and says, I'm gone tomorrow. This is something where plan this out. It's an amicable parting of 2 parties, parting ways. And then that, in turn, helps the program to stay successful and be timely in the hiring of a new coach. And it's the way it's supposed to be done. And I think the most important part of this, too, I keep echoing that, is that it's before signing day. Signing day is just over a week from the time I'm recording this right now. And so you have a week now with a new coach who I'm assuming is going to take the first couple days and week to get his staff in place. And now all of a sudden you can retain that signing class, or at least attempt to retain that signing class that Lenoir Rhyne has going on over there, which is a good one. And that's big because now for a team that maybe doesn't have that luxury, who has a vacant head coaching spot right now, they're trying to get all that stuff wrapped up right now because the signing period right now is so crucial, especially for these Division II, NAIA, D3 type of squads that are all competing for the same kind of echelon of kids there. So bravo to Lenoir Rhyne making this, getting this done. It seems like a really good get for them. And this guy has certainly won. He's a proven winner and has enough on his resume, I think, to argue for maybe not a head coaching job at some larger D1s, but certainly other type of positions. So while this definitely is an upgrade, it's not a reach. I certainly don't think it's a reach. We've seen a lot of what this Kaiser team has had to offer. When you lose your starting quarterback going into the national championship game and beat the defending undefeated national champions, your resume is pretty freaking good. So we'll get Schwarzler on here, I think, next week to probably talk more about this, but really excited for those guys and excited for Division II to have a really another great coach coming into the fold. Now, another team that did just get a new head coach, albeit one that had been involved with the program, Pittsburgh State made quite the announcement, made quite the waves this week, as they and Ferris State jointly announced a Week 0 matchup for the history books. The Bulldogs will take on Pittsburgh State And Ferris State will host the game in 2024. Ferris State will go to Pittsburg State in 2024, and Pitt State will come to Top Taggart Field in Grand Rapids, Michigan in 2025. So it's a 2-year contract on this kind of game, which is very standard with these type of things. But man, the national implications from this, depending on the rankings you look at, obviously, like two of the top 10 teams in the country. That's undoubted. 2 of the top 10 teams in the country, less than a couple weeks after the NCAA Week 0 proposal is actually approved by the legislative bodies and the powers that be, these 2 squads go out of their way to schedule a contest that is going to be awesome. Super Region 3 dogfight, and I love it and I hate it. I love it because we get to see some awesome football. I only hate it a little bit because that means one of these teams is going to lose, and then depending on how the playoff committee views that, I mean, it's a quality opponent for sure, but we'll see how that impacts the playoff kind of implications. But for the most part, I love it. Like, we need more of this in Division II football. You saw last year how we kicked off the year with Grand Valley and Colorado School of Mines. Now, granted, a lot further apart geographically and different super regions at that, but the way that was able to kickstart the D2 season and some more of the parity that we're going to see now with this Week 0 proposal that has been officially approved now, this is awesome. Like, this is what we need. And when people talk about why week two is important, but why Week 0 is important, yes, it gives you the flexibility to schedule a bye week. That's a huge part of it. So now they're playing in Week 0. Maybe they opt to not take a game in Week 7, Week 8, Week 9, and they maybe rest up that week. Maybe. I don't know how that's going to work out right now. But looking at this, the game is going to be on August 31st at, down there in Pittsburg, Kansas, before, like I said, 2025, they will come back to Big Rapids, not Grand Rapids. Excuse me. That's a bad mistake on my part. But January 13th is when the legislation was passed. So you're looking at just a couple weeks since that was passed, and they were able to get that going. And these 2 teams played in the 2022 playoffs, if you do remember, came down to Ferris State 17-14. Ferris did take that win, and that was probably the best game they had, maybe outside of Grand Valley, en route to their undefeated national championship that season. So we've seen what this is like in the past. Tony Anise obviously still there for Ferris State, and he talked about it. He said, quote here, "This will be a tremendous test for our team. We'll be facing a great opponent to open the season, but we look forward to the challenge." And right now, he ranks as the nation's winningest active head coach, regardless of any level. That's Coach Anise over there at Ferris State. The years that they've had down there are certainly second to none. Now, for Pittsburg State, with Coach, I believe it's Tom Anthony. Yes, Tom Anthony, the new head coach for them coming in. Talk about a wake-up call, right? Talk about coming in and you're inheriting a solid team, but you lose a lot. There's a lot of guys, being poached from this roster because the previous head coach goes to NAU and is taking some of your talented guys with him up to Division I. And then 2, you graduate a lot. You talk about guys like Devin Garrison and our guy, Trace Jeffries, on the offensive front there, and some other really talented pieces, especially on the outside. But this is going to be a prove-it game for him. And it's interesting for me to see technically a new head coach. He was away from the program for a year before coming back. It's interesting for me to see that he comes in and wants a challenge right off the rip. And I think it's just a tone setter. It's a tone setter for that Pittsburg State squad. It's going to better prepare you for MIAA competition because you're going to face the gauntlet, whether that be Emporia State, Northwest, Missouri State, some of those kind of squads. You got Central Missouri. I go down the list, right? But the Bulldogs from Ferris will now play a full 11-game schedule this season over 12 weeks of action. So they will have a bye week built in. So now I think that's big, and that's kind of what I just talked about. Before this, they were only going to play 10 games, and that's when it can really come to hurt you come playoff time because the GLIAC's going to be a gauntlet, even if you're Ferris State. And having an extra game or 2 against a top-quality opponent from another conference is a great way to really solidify yourself in those super region rankings and eventually find your way into the dance. And then we know from there what Ferris State can do at the national level. So that's big news in the D2 football world. Other side of, I guess, not really other side of the country. It's the MEC, so it's south. But Fairmont State also picking up a new head coach. This one a little bit more recent of an announcement than that Week 0 matchup, and you'll see it right here. There you go. Luke Barker, the 19th head coach over at Fairmont State. And this one, again, maybe not quite as big of news as the job taken over at Lenoir Rhyne or Tom Anthony coming in at Pittsburgh State. But again, Fairmont, a squad that has had some very recent experience being nationally ranked, a top 25 squad in those kind of playoff rankings before a couple late drop-offs there towards the end of the year. Them and Frostburg had battled it out. But this is still a pretty coveted job, I do believe. And right now, he's got a lot of experience at a lot of the similar level schools. You look at his resume at Charleston, inside of the same conference. IUP, that's Indiana University of Pennsylvania, in the PSAC. He was assistant head coach, offensive coordinator over there. So he's very familiar, obviously, with this level of football and even with this conference in many regards. The familiarity is there. And he also has some big associate head football coaches at both of those, assistant and then associate head coaches at both those stops. So he's been trusted by other staffs in that role. Obviously not at a head coaching capacity, but certainly in that role. He's got a great offensive mind from everything that I've read about him. And Charleston was a squad, again, that this year made the national playoffs. In the last 3 years, the team was 27-10, conference title, and this last year made it to the second round of the playoffs. And his offense led the conference in scoring, first downs, rushing touchdowns, total yards, total touchdowns, and even more. So an offensive guru, I guess you could say, a good get for Fairmont State, and hopefully something that's going to keep them towards the upper tier of that conference, because that region certainly could be wide open for them. There's a lot of parity kind of in that region. So that seems like a good get for Fairmont. Not too much else to add onto that note. But finally, Division III, there is another new head coach making the scene on a team that just this year was in the national playoffs after winning, I believe, their 6th conference championship in a row. That being over at Delaware Valley. And here you have it right here. Mike Isgro, I'm hopefully pronouncing that correct, head football coach now over there. And you see the word elevated there, which means he was obviously in the program before. Not only was this guy in the program, this dude lives and breathes DVU, Aggies, man. He has been on the coaching staff since 2015, assistant coach, special teams coordinator, recruiting coordinator, running backs coach. But prior to that, I mean, the dude is a Hall of Fame student athlete there. And dude was a player. He's now been with the coaching staff for a number of years, 8 years going on now. And it seems like a very obvious get for them. And since he has, between playing and coaching, 8 Middle Atlantic Conference championships. They've won 6 in a row as he's the coach, which is crazy. He was a starting quarterback back in 2009 and 2008. He won the conference championships as a QB. So, again, seems like a pretty obvious move for this Delaware Valley team, a team that is, if they continue this role, man, they're guaranteeing themselves a spot in the national playoffs. So we'll see if we can't get our guy Louis Barrios on, talk about their new head coach, man, at the helm down there, the quarterback, who obviously had a great year for them. They did fizzle out a little bit in the playoffs, but they played a lot of really good football this year. Excited to see where that goes. Otherwise, like I told you, a relatively short episode today. If you've got stuff you think we should talk about, if there's different kind of news and things that maybe we miss, admittedly it does happen, tweet at us. Send us a DM on Twitter, Instagram, whatever. Comment on the YouTube video, whatever it is. I appreciate you all tuning in, listening, watching, wherever. This has been D1 Rejects. We'll be back next week.